Win number 3 in a row. There is a lot to get to for this game tonight. Some lineup decisions from Tippett that I think we'll all have some strong opinions of. But first, I want to go back to Sunday night because that was a lot of fun. The weekend in general, Nation Dan, that was one of the more fun weekends in recent Oilers memory.
Yeah, it's been a long 2 weeks for Oilers fans in general, so it just makes it that much more sweet. Being able to just absolutely dust up on the Senators, even though it wasn't a game where we probably should have been able to exhale a little bit, we weren't able to. It's been good to be an Oilers fan for sure.
Yeah, the last weekend there, like, you get a really big win over Toronto, which is a team that's probably going to finish near the top of this division, and then you follow it up with just a good old stomping of the Ottawa Senators. Zach, that game against the Sens, you more impressed by the 8 goals or more worried about the fact they gave up 5 and got outplayed a little bit at even strength?
I'm not gonna lie. As nice to put up 8 goals on any team, giving up 5 goals to Ottawa, especially the way the Oilers definitely concerning to me. I wrote about that in the day after piece. The Oilers struggled to play with the lead ahead all season long here, and we saw it again happen against Ottawa. Thankfully, McDavid and Draisaitl did their thing and built a good enough for the Oilers to be able to fall back on. But you do something like that against any other team in this division. And you're looking at coming out on the short end of that stick.
Josh Park, what did you take away from the weekend around Edmonton?
Just absolute point nine, man. That was unbelievable. I think we saw just sheer dominance that Draisaitl can have on a game if they decide to. And I think a lot of people, you are allowed to have a little bit of fear considering they gave up 5 goals. And look at, I don't think we can base that much off Skinner's NHL start. But no, it was just a fun weekend. I enjoyed that game a lot. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the team reacts tonight. I think that it'd be super easy to kind of sit back and along this one again. I think I don't want to say it's a message from Dave Tippett that he expects to obviously come out with a win again. They want to get sharp in the lineup, but I think tonight will be a good test for him.
Yeah, I think tonight will be a really good test as well. We're getting some comments that there's a really bad echo, so I'm trying something new here with the audio. We're getting used to some new equipment here at the Nation, so shout out to everyone on the Twitch chat for letting us know. We're also supposed to be live on Facebook for the first time today, so yeah, pretty shitty that we're having audio issues when we go live on Facebook. But tonight, what are we sort of expecting tonight? On my pregame podcast, I said Edmonton -1.5 is just an absolute lock. Nation Dan, you think Ottawa's going to make it a bit of a closer game? Or you think it's another big win?
Opportunistic offense than just all offense all the time kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably bang on with what we're going to see here. Going over to you, Zach Lang, what are you expecting tonight?
Yeah, I think you got to clean up some of that defensive zone stuff. I mean, you got to give Ottawa credit where it's due. They're a hardworking team, and they're gonna make Edmonton work for it tonight. I think Matt Murray is going to be looking to have a bounce back performance after giving up 3 goals in 7.5 minutes. So I think it's going to be a bit of a tighter game. But I mean, I don't see any reason why the Oilers won't walk away with a regulation win here tonight.
Gonna come over to you now, Josh Park. I know you're a bit of a betting man yourself. I've been sitting on that Jesse Puljujärvi goal prop forever now. I am waiting. Is he due? Is tonight potentially the night?
Plus 320, somewhere in that range, I imagine, which seems high for a guy playing with McDavid. But man, you got to imagine, I don't want to say Puljujärvi's probably getting frustrated because he's probably happy that he's over in North America again. He's playing with McDavid. He's in a great situation. But man, last game, you'll never guess, the one Edmonton Oiler that didn't get a point was the guy that I bet on, Jesse Puljujärvi. I did bet on Darnell Nurse goal, though. I'll take credit for that one. But Yeah, imagine he's going to be due. It was kind of the same situation as Dominic. You felt like was coming for him. He was getting good spots. He was getting great opportunities with Drysdale. You could tell there was chemistry building there. And it's kind of the same thing for Puljujärvi. It's going to be inevitable at this point. So if I was a betting man, which I am, I will be putting money on Jesse Puljujärvi to score tonight. I will be.
There were like a handful of big lineup decisions coming into this one. We're going to see Bouchard getting a crack into the lineup. They're going with the 7D, 11 forwards. James Neal draws out after a pair of games. Nation Dan, which lineup decision is most surprising for you?
The James Neal one is confusing to me as a guy on radio this week that James Neal needs to spot up on that top line. He made me look like a genius over the weekend, just shooting the puck from everywhere, getting the goals that he needs to see from a guy like that. And taking him out of the lineup, I guess I wonder what the plan is to be able to use Bouchard in these situations. You imagine that he's probably just going to be a guy that slides into pairings here and there, but yeah, I just don't get the James Neal thing, especially when he's playing as well as he is. But Tippett's a guy that I think has a pulse on what guys are feeling, and so you wonder if maybe those are the tires on the treads are getting a little weaker here as we go along through this season. And it's been an absolute grind. We've got 3 days off coming up, so James Neal gets a little advance on that, and so that's good.
I once again apologize for the audio issues we had early on there, but I have this thing sorted out now. I'm going old school radio. I'm turning on and off faders as everyone talks and as I throw to everyone. Zach Lang, most surprising move for you from Dave Tippett?
I think it's got to be dressing 7 defensemen. I'm not really a big fan of it. I think you got to have a good group of 6 that can rotate in and out. I think when you're trying to put a 7th defenseman in there, it can confuse the pairings a little bit and make it a little bit more difficult for those guys. But hey, what do I know? There's a reason Dave Tippett's a head coach and I'm a lowly blogger here. But at the end of the day, I think it's great to see Bouchard getting into some action finally. It's long overdue. So many defensemen from his draft class are already playing regular minutes in the NHL right now, and he's the next in line to make that jump. So I think it's great to see that finally happen.
Are you a little bit worried that with 7 defensemen, we might not see Evan Bouchard play very much? Because that's my concern. Like, I want to see him at 5-on-5 a lot, but I'm worried with Cuckoo in there. Tippett's just going to go with the guys he's more comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a prime time to be able to get Bouchard into a more comfortable game for him. I mean, Ottawa, they're not the best offensive team in the NHL, obviously. So, for him, it would take a little bit of the pressure off of him coming in a game like this. And I think you're totally right too, Tyler. I mean, we need to see what Bouchard can do 5-on-5. We know he's a power play guru. We know he'll be able to run the point for the Oilers power play for the years to come. But we got to see what he's got here at 5-on-5.
Josh Park, I'm going to come over to you now. In terms of surprising lineup decisions, is it Neal or is it maybe the choice to go 11-7?
Yeah, you almost get a sense that maybe Neal might be a little bit banged up. He seemed fine after the last game, but it's kind of an interesting decision that they decided to pull him rather than Alex Chiasson. Considering the success that Neal started to have on the power play, I can understand the idea of going with the 7 defensemen so that you can get Bouchard in the lineup and you can get him into a bit of a rhythm. So it's always weird when you're running 7 defensemen because it's such a big rotation that you have to throw in. Which pair is the 3rd or the 7th guy going to rotate in on? But I just didn't know why. Like, maybe one of you guys can answer this for me. Why did they not take Chiasson out rather than Neal? Like, I don't really understand that.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop in on that. Like, for me, Neal is a better player at 5-on-5. I think Neal brings a bit more of a physical edge to the bottom 6. I've just noticed him making more of an impact at even strength, and he's producing way more on the power play. So I don't really understand the choice to go with Neal or go with Chiasson over Neal. Zach, are you just as puzzled?
Yeah, absolutely. Considering, Alex Chiasson was put on waivers, 28 hours ago. Mm-hmm. I think it's a bit of a head-scratching move. Chiasson struggled this year. He's not the player that he's been for the Oilers in the last couple of seasons, and I really hope that he's not out there on the power play because the puck has died on his stick so many times on the power play this year, and especially when you consider the fact that James Neal had 2 goals down low in that spot that Chiasson usually plays on the power play. To take Neal out and put Chiasson back in, it's a bit of a head scratcher for me, right? So it's weird to kind of look at this, but hey, you know what? At the end of the day, if they come out and win the game, 2 points is 2 points. So all of it's for naught, I guess.
Yeah, Dan, are you going to come to bat here a little bit for our boy Alex Chason, or are you just as puzzled as the trio of us?
I don't know. Like for Chason, for me, it's not like we're playing the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's not like we're playing the Montreal Canadiens. We do have the Ottawa Senators. They went and lit them up last game. So you got to think that you get guys out there like Bouchard in situations where they can just hopefully kick some more of that rust off of the old wheels. So I'm not upset about Chason still being in the lineup. I come back to it again, but the Bouchard, I'm just confused as to what his usage is going to be. Like I don't imagine that his minutes will be over 5 minutes by the end of the game tonight. So yeah, it's weird, but again, it's the last game of back to back games. And so we've got a couple days here to kind of figure things out. I don't look at this as a lineup where, this is the lineup we're going to try and make the playoffs with. This is a lineup where we're going to try and score some more goals and hopefully play some better defense as a team.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. And you mentioned we get some days off after this. I wonder if we're not just going to see Connor McDavid play like 30 minutes here tonight, and he might just rotate in on that fourth line. Zach, do you think we're just going to see a ton of Connor McDavid because Tippett knows he's getting 3 days off after this?
I mean, why not, right? I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for him and Leon Draisaitl to continue building on their incredible season that they're already having, right? I know Chris Johnson was tweeting about it the other night about, hey, could these guys break 100 points? And I think there's a legitimate chance that they could. This could be another one of those 8-5 games for the Oilers. It really could. We saw how bad Ottawa looked defensively and their complete inability to shut down McDavid or Draisaitl on the weekend. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see what happens. And I think, you got to unleash McDavid here.
Josh, I'm going to come over to you. Do you think we're going to see an unleashed Connor McDavid here? Is this going to be like another 3-4 point night? Like, that'd be insane if we're looking at a 2-game sample being like, he had 9 points in those 2 games. It's whatever.
Boys, I think that's the only outcome considering they're going to go with 7D. I think the sense that if they're going to take out one of those wingers in the bottom four or in the bottom line there, I think that obviously means that they plan on double shifting to McDavid, very similar to the way that they did in the last game and the game before that. So, and I think as Oilers fans, we can all appreciate that. We obviously love to see more Connor McDavid, but I think that Tippett recognizes that although these could be trap games, these are games where you build momentum as a team. You saw Vancouver beat up on Ottawa 3 games in a row. Yeah, they got dusted by Montreal last night and looked horrendous. But at the same time, these are the type of games that you need to win, and you can't play these ones lightly because this is where you build momentum as a team. So I definitely think that we're going to see a lot of Connor McDavid tonight. As you mentioned, Tyler, this is 3 days off in a row here after this, which is also probably another reason they wanted to get Evan Bouchard in the lineup because you got to get him in a game. He can't be sitting on the taxi squad or down in, I guess you could send him down to Bakersfield because they're playing games now, but I think they want him up at the big club. So I think we're going to see a lot of Connor McDavid tonight. And Dan, I'll disagree with you a little bit on how much I think we're going to see Evan Bouchard. I think that as long as we're not in a situation where we're chasing the game, I seriously think we're going to see a lot of Evan Bouchard tonight. I think considering
I could see them playing Bouchard even in a fourth line role and just get him some reps out there on the ice.
You think he might play a little forward tonight?
Like forward?
I don't know. I just it doesn't make sense otherwise. As a team, it doesn't make sense to have him out there otherwise, unless they're looking at sliding somebody else up as a forward.
Well, I personally think Kukuk is the true 7th defenseman tonight. I don't think they'd be dressing Evan Bouchard if they didn't want to get him some serious minutes because he hasn't played any game so far this season. If I had to guess, I bet you we'll see north of 12 to 13 minutes for Evan Bouchard tonight. Genuinely.
Really want to talk about a defenseman jumping up. Let's talk about Darnell Nurse, who plays more as a right winger or left winger than he does as a defenseman sometimes.
We talked about that on ON Radio, where he's just he's feeling it right now. He is in the groove, feeling it in the lineup. He feels, and you see it with Barry too. I was the one that tweeted seconds before he scored his goal, where you could just see that comfort level is just coming into the mix for him on the power play. I'm not saying about 5-on-5 yet, but on the power play for sure.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Barry, and I've been praising Darnell Nurse on every podcast, radio show, whatever lately. I just think right now, Darnell Nurse still, for some reason, has a bit of a bad reputation with some Oilers fans. He leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and I just really don't get it because this is a guy. And I'll come to you for your take on this, Zach. he's playing the most minutes in the NHL 5, or he's played the most minutes in the NHL 5-on-5. He's basically going up against the other team's best every single night. And like his goal share is good. His shot share is good. Like I don't understand complaints about Darnell Nurse.
I think it's a bit of an issue with the eye test for Nurse sometimes where, sometimes you'll see him overcommit and then get absolutely burnt on to play. Like I think back to that, the Mitch Marner incident a couple games ago where Nurse got totally out of position. And there's small things like that in Darnell's game, but you're totally right. He's playing some of the most consistent hockey of his entire NHL career. And, at 25 years old, he's really kind of coming into his prime, so they say, especially for an NHL defenseman. He looks great with Ethan Bear, and Bear's a guy who really can help steady Nurse's game too. I think it's a bit of a scapegoat sort of thing in Edmonton too. I mean, as long as any of us have followed the Edmonton Oilers, there's always been one defenseman on the team who people just love to hate, and that's Darnell Nurse. Yeah, Chris Russell is one of them too, but Darnell Nurse has been one of those guys for a long time. So it's frustrating to see. I'm a big Nurse fan, but I think he's playing some great hockey right now.
Well, and I will say, not to jump into too much of the queue, but I do think that you're right, Zach. I think that everybody's been hard on every defenseman, and I don't think that much of it's been like super unwarranted. No defenseman has had a perfect run except for Slater Cuckoo, but that's another story for another day. But like Larson's struggled, Barry has struggled at 5-on-5. Caleb Jones has had some of the worst pinches I've seen from any kind of player. But like, and it's been surprising because he's not that guy, but it seems like they're all just trying to force the issue a little bit. And again, to your point, like Darnell Nurse probably has been our best defenseman other than Slater Cuckoo, who hasn't played every game, unlike Darnell. So yeah, it's perplexing to say the least.
Yeah, it has been a little confusing. Do you see maybe, and I'll come to you for your take on Nurse here, actually, Josh. Like, what have you been impressed with his game? Are you one of the people who maybe still wants to see a little bit more from him? What's been your take on him recently?
Yeah, if you ask any of my friends, Tyler, I would slot into that category of people that are very critical of Darnell Nurse. I think Zach kind of touched on it a little bit. I think the number one issue that I have with Darnell Nurse is I think that sometimes he tries to activate too much in a physical role, and that exposes him horribly defensively. I think we've seen it in a few instances this season already where, he tries to go up and make a big play with a big physical presence, and he goes up and tries to make a hit, and that leaves the other defenseman in on an island essentially, and then they get burnt. And I find the biggest issue with Darnell Nurse is sometimes he just gets going too quick and tries to make too many plays, and then he ends up getting burnt. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen, I've praised Darnell Nurse over the last 2 to 3 games because I think for him to be effective as a defenseman is he needs to get activated offensively. Because he's not a shutdown defenseman. He's not a guy that's going to move the puck great out of your own end. If you want Darnell Nurse to be effective, similar to a way that Tyson Barrie is, he has to be activated offensively. And we've seen that a lot from him over the last 2 to 3 games where he jumps up in the rush. If he notices that one of the wingers is streaking down the right side, he'll jump up quickly on the left and get going with him and create an odd man rush. I don't want to say that Darnell Nurse will never be a shutdown defenseman. I don't want to say he isn't that great in his own end because he is physical, as I mentioned. But I think if you want him to be truly effective, he has to get activated offensively. And I think that's why he's been so effective over the last couple games.
I wonder if maybe, like, Dan, do you think it could be a career arc similar to Jeff Petrie here? Where, like, by the time he's, like, 30, 31, we're looking at him as just, like, a really, really good, complete all-around defenseman, and it might just take him a little bit longer?
I don't know. I think that Darnell is always going to have detractors here in town, and so I guess that is similar to Jeff Petrie in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people look back fondly on Jeff Petrie's time, but a lot of people railed on Jeff when he was here. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's a fair assessment. My only concern with Darnell is just off-season stuff in the sense that, like, I don't know what number we're going to bring him in at. And I don't know if that value is fair for him and for the team. It's, he might be more valuable playing the exact same style and role that he has here in a team that has more shelter for him, more defensive sheltering for him. When he's paired up with a guy like Ethan Bear, Bear had an amazing season last year, but he's looked mediocre, I guess, this year. And so it's not like his gaffes don't show up on the score sheet. That's a big thing with a lot of teams. I feel like, same thing with Chris Russell. If Chris Russell is your worst defenseman on your defensive grouping, not a big issue. but he's expected to be the 3-4 defenseman for us, and that's where the issues come up, and that's been an issue for every one of them. Adam Larson is not a number one defenseman, but a lot of people expect number one defenseman kind of numbers out of him, and then he does the same thing to his D partner. So it's like a death by 1,000 cuts again, to quote Chiarelli. But it's an issue for our defense that you have to solidify it somehow, and I don't know if that answer comes this season or not.
Zach, I'll give you last word on the defense here. Your take on Nurse? Do you think this is a guy who long term could grow into that sort of Petrie role, or do you think it's maybe something where, like Dan said, he'd be better off sort of in a little bit more of a sheltered second pairing guy?
I think Darnell Nurse absolutely could become a Petrie down the road. I think Nurse has all of the offensive upside that he's shown early in his career that I don't think Jeff Petrie quite did in his own right. When Petrie was here, he wasn't a great defenseman. And I think that's something that people still tend to forget looking back in hindsight. Of course, he projected well, but he had his struggles here in Edmonton, and there was a reason that he was traded. And, in hindsight, the Oilers were able to get a draft pick they used on Ethan Bear, so it all kind of works out in the end. But a guy like Darnell Nurse has all of the tools that you look for in an NHL defenseman. He's big, he can skate, he can hit, he can score, he can pass. He's got the total toolbox. And at 25 years old, he's still such a young player in the grand scheme of things when you look at defensemen. So I think down the road, we'll absolutely be talking about Darnell Nurse like that.
Last area I wanted to touch on everyone with, Dan, you kind of said the lineup we're seeing tonight maybe isn't going to be the lineup that's going to get us to the playoffs or anything. But on Saturday night against Calgary, I would fully expect that Dave Tippett is going to give us the best lineup, because that's a huge game. You're sort of setting the tone for the year with the first Battle of Alberta. The question I want everyone to answer is, what are you expecting from the BOA this Saturday? And Dan, I'll start with you. Are we getting lots of clips for Hockey Fight, or do you think it could be a little bit toned down?
I think that the fact that Cassian has been, and I don't want to characterize him as an animal, but he's been neutered in the sense that there's just not that
there isn't the same bite,
not that intensity, that same fire. Exactly. So there's an issue there for me. Outside of Cassian, you imagine Jujhar Khaira, maybe Archibald mixes it up with somebody, but it'll be 375 days since they last played each other.
Wild.
So I'm interested, and I'm excited to talk to a guy like Sean Brown. We have him on ON Radio there on Friday, and where he thinks it'll go from. Just because from a fan's perspective, absolutely, I want to see the fire and the brimstone. But I'm just worried that the players are cutting the edges pretty razor thin right now. And as you said, Tyler, it's a super important game to kind of set that tone against the Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton logjam that we're going to probably see here for the next couple months.
It's such a huge 2 points, because I think Edmonton and Calgary might end up being neck and neck for the final playoff spot in the North with the way things are going. Josh, do you think we're going to see high energy, lots of fights, or do you think it could be a little tame?
My heart as a hockey fan wants to say that we're going to see a similar BOA that we've seen last year and the year before, but I think the players realize it, and I think the coaches realize it as well, that 2 points in a 56-game schedule, which really turns into a 4-point swing for these teams, is a lot bigger than kind of what we saw last year out of these two teams in the matchups that they had. So I want to be optimistic. I want to say we're going to have a wild goalie fight, crazy scrum-filled game, but my inner senses are telling me it's probably going to be a little bit cooled down, just because, these teams understand these games between teams in the North Division is a 4-point swing. And like you mentioned, Tyler, both of these teams are probably going to be hovering in that, 3 to 5 seed come the end of the season here. So they're going to be looking for points wherever they can get them. So I think that in this first matchup, I think, we'll see a little bit of emotion, probably more emotion than we've seen in any Oilers game so far this season. But I think the biggest thing is you look for some of the guys that have been a little bit pedestrian so far this season to kind of add some juice to this fire. I want to see something out of Zach Cassian. We'll see if Jujhar Khaira gets back in the lineup, especially if the the penalty kill is bad tonight as well again. Yeah. We'll see if they try to get him in there to add some spark to that. So, yeah, I would say it's probably going to be a little bit cool.
Just looking at the Twitch chat a little bit here, Brad Stepanko says he thinks it'll take 2 or 3 games for the BOA to get fired up. Roman TV says BOA is going to be a light simmer this year, but Young Angus he says game 1 will be toned down, but by game 3, it's going to be explosive. So everyone on the Twitch chat.
just before Zach, you give your answer, I just want to mention that Flames fans have been really talking about how Tkachuk has been real quiet the last couple of games. He had his fight with Ben Sherratt.
Yeah.
He had his incident with Jake Muzzin, and then the goalie ahead of that. But it seems like we're seeing a different Tkachuk than we've seen in the past. He may not be the pest that we were hoping for either. So,
Zach, I'll come to you for the final word on this. What do you think we're seeing from the BOA? Lots of scraps, or do you think they're just going to be so focused on the 2 points that everything else will kind of just be secondary?
Well, it's really interesting when you look at the Calgary Flames as a team right now. You know, they've only played 8 games on the season, 3 back from the Edmonton Oilers, and they're a team that's kind of had their ups and downs right now. You know, when we look back at that Jake Muzzin incident, Elliot Friedman had a pretty interesting report today in his 31 Thoughts column that Matthew Tkachuk kind of called out his teammates and said, hey, you know, you guys didn't really have my back there in that situation at the end of the game, and that's something that was discussed. So, you know, this could be a situation. I'm going to play the contrarian a little bit to what Josh and Dan said here, but I have a feeling this is a game that could get off the rails pretty quickly. You know, we saw about what happened last year, obviously, and that was stuff that is still very much festering.
Oh, did Zach freeze up on us? Zach froze up on us a little bit here, but I'm going to finish
get off the rails pretty quickly. So I'm really interested to see what happens.
Oh, there we go. We got the end of Zach's take there as well. Thanks for that, Zach. We got a bit of a freeze in that one, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to agree with Zach a little bit on this one in the sense that Zach Kassian, we're still waiting for him to wake up. Tkachuk's calling out his teammates saying they don't have his back. Like, there might be enough guys in that game who are motivated to show that, hey, I am engaged and I am ready to go, that maybe that Battle of Alberta, hopefully, it'll be a little bit more explosive than maybe we think. I want to thank everyone who tuned in for battling through the technical difficulties we had earlier. So we're going to wrap up this week's episode of State of the Nation now. Once again, I got a pregame podcast out that'll help you get set for the game. Josh and Jay, you guys doing your live show again as well, and that's available every game day?
Every game day, we're going to be going live today somewhere between 4 and 5 o'clock, probably closer to 4 o'clock. So make sure you tune in. It'll be here, wherever you're streaming on, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube.
And there you go. I promise there won't be a weird echo when they talk. I am personally making that guarantee for their show that there won't be technical difficulties. We'll